As true to my form, I'll start bang on time. So firstly, I'd like to absolutely, of course, thank Yvonne for joining us today for this sort of mini overview, little webinar workshop, just going through a little bit of her methodology that she uses as well. And it's very exciting for us to be able to hear from other universities and other areas in the fields too, about how we're actually addressing some of the most critical research challenges that we have in the world. So Yvonne is a professor of design psychology and director of the QUT Design Lab at the Creative Industries faculty at QUT. She's been incredibly successful in research grants using her arts-based participatory methods with around $2.5 million in ARC, NH, MRC and industry funding. So just to set the scene, that it's exciting to be able to hear about art-based participatory research receiving recognition and funding across the sector. I know you've done some really exciting work that we'll get to hear about today. So before I hand over to you, I'll just sort of run through how we'll run the workshop. So you'll share your slides, go through exactly what you'd like to share with us, and I'll manage the comments and the chat function. So if you have any questions along the way, please pop them in there and we'll ask Yvonne either at the end or throughout. But enough from me. No one's here to talk with me at all. It's to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us again.
No worries. Hang on. I'm just sharing the screen, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hang on. Sorry, it's just my end is frozen. Oh, here we are. Okay. Sorry. Apologies. I just need to move the Zoom thing to the side so it's not in my way. That will do. Okay, so I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Monash, for the invitation. I'm really going to whip through a few of the arts-based research methods I've used, and I'd love to have a conversation about how you think you might use them, and just have a real dialogue about that. So there's a few spaces where I've left we can talk about each method afterwards or right at the end, just see how we go. I guess Christine asked me to talk about why I started doing this research and what my interest was. And years ago, I read a book by renowned sociologist Norman Denton, and he talked about how he wanted to, and I quote, trigger a discourse that troubles and positively changes the world. And that's kind of how I feel. And I try to do that through arts-based research. Why it's not letting, oh, here we are, sorry, it's just slow. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where I am today, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. I recognise that these have always been lands and places of teaching, research, and learning, and that these lands have never been ceded. I also acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander play within the QUT community. Why? I'm having, oh, here we are. I meant to press it 3 times to advance, but that's all right. Arts-based research is a form of research that mixes sort of creative arts and research context. And it's used in all aspects of research. It can be used when you're collecting the data, when you're doing the analysis, the interpretation, or the representation. And if you're at all interested in learning more about it, I highly recommend the work of Patricia Levy. Here we are, now we're away. I just had to press that once to get to the new slide. Yay. And today I want to talk about 3 arts-based research approaches that I've used. The first is photo voice, which is the joining of photography with voice. The second is research poetry. And it's a form of found poetry where you create poems or poem-like prose from interview transcripts. And the third is art. And I've used that. We've done drawing from participants and also cartoons, joint made by the research team.
What'd you say?
Oh, sorry. So why participatory creative arts research methods? I think it's because of their power. They really have a communicative power in that when you see them or read them, you can feel the emotion and all of a sudden it has more impact, I think, than often traditional research that might be a book or a report that sits on a shelf. These are, they can be very impactful. And I also like the approach because it's very participatory. So you engage with participants and they get something out of it too. So let me read you one example. The poem on the left here is called Fight All the Way, and it was crafted from an interview transcript with an older person living in aged care. And I'll just read it. I hope I am happy. My memory is good. I join in everything. I am content. It's only my flaming body. I'm full of arthritis, but I push myself. I won't let that beat me. I will fight all the way. I will walk across the room. And I think that's really powerful in lots of different ways, because most of us take walking across the room for granted. And here we have Elsie who's saying that's actually her goal in life. And yet we could have reported that in an interview quote, which, yes, that would have been impactful, but I think it's slightly more impactful in the poetic form. And similarly, seeing the picture as well. So I'll talk through the processes of how to do that in this presentation. Actually, Christine, I've shared with Christine the link to the PowerPoint, like it's on SlideShare, so she can share that with you guys too. So arts-based research should be emotional, evocative, provocative, illuminating, educational and transformative. And I do believe that it is. And I read this book by Australian anthropologist Inga Clendon, who talked about how she wanted to, quote, seduce an intelligent, non-specialist audience into thinking about the issues that she cared about most. And that's kind of how I feel here as well. So today I'm going to talk about two research projects. The first was a larger Australian Research Council funded project to myself, Professor Laurie Byes, and Nicole Devlin, and there was a large research team there as well, Geraldine Donahue, Tricia King, and a number of other researchers. And a project here was to track the experience of aged care over time, from when older people entered aged care until they died. And we used innovative methods of photo voice. That was a core part of the methodology, and also research poetry. All the photographs and poems are freely available from our project website down the bottom there, insideagecareproject.wordpress.com. So the ARC project itself was quite large and had like multiple cohorts, people on aged care, people with dementia, those living in a retirement village, and also they nominated two others, a family member and a staff member. And so we had this kind of triangulation over time about how well or not that older person was aging. But I'm going to focus on residents in aged care today, so the nursing home section, and the two methods of photo voice and research poetry. And part of the reason that we did this project is that we don't know very much about what goes on inside aged care. Yet, as we know from the Royal Commission recently, there is often concerns about abuse and neglect. And the Royal Commission report has argued, its most recent interim report has said that Australia has drifted into an ageist mindset, and we need to tackle this because these older people are left out of sight and out of mind. And what we're trying to do here is, I guess, push back against that and use visuals and poems to put older people living in aged care more into the awareness of the broader community. And the second project I'm going to talk about is Our Care Journey. This is a much smaller project, so while we had several $100,000 for the ARC, our part of this project was only $5,000, but we managed to create a digital exhibition. This is us here at QT's The Cube. It's a massive space, and again we used the whole project was about co-designing an app for older carers, and our part of the project was to use visual methods and poetry and pull together this exhibition. And we also used some art and some drawing in there, and I will talk about that at the end of today's presentation. And here's an example of one of the sketches done by one of the research team. And I think you can see the power in that. This is an older carer. It's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, including a cat and a teddy bear and a computer. It kind of just shows, I think, visually what it's like to be a carer and the challenges. So, method one, photo voice. So photo voice is the joining of photography with voice. It's a participatory qualitative research methodology introduced over 2 decades ago by Carolyn Wang. They developed it in China, in a rural village there, and since then it's been used in lots of different ways. And essentially, at its essence, it involves putting cameras in the hands of participants and asking them to photograph and advocate for a specific topic. And it's underpinned by this awareness of sort of feminism, about sort of action research and wanting to make a change. And if you are interested in doing a photo voice project, I highly recommend this book I've got up here by Amanda Latz. Sorry, I'm just struggling to move forward. What's going on?
We can hear you trying.
I know! Why is it not going forward? Hope it's not that cyber attack thing. I doubt that would be us. Hang on. What? Oh, there we are. Oh, great. I'm going to press somewhere else. Okay. So photo voice generally involves 3 main stages. Firstly, ask participants to take photos of things or places or processes that relate to the topic under investigation. So if we were to do this project now, we might say, hey, everyone take photographs of what it's like to be using Zoom for a presentation. The answer is really challenging. And you might take a photo of a clock or a watch or something that was annoying. Secondly, you'd bring people together to talk about and share why they took each photograph. And thirdly, and this is the critical part, hold a public exhibition to communicate the findings to decision makers, to policy makers, to those that have the power to enact change. So photo voice very much is a participatory action focused approach to, I guess, showing a problem and then trying to reach decision makers and get action. So Amanda Latz has outlined 8 key steps that you can see here. But part of the joy in of photo voice is it's really flexible. So you don't have to take all of these steps, in this particular order. You do need to think about ethics. You need to think about the task, and you need to think about how you might present this back to the public. But you don't have to do it exactly that way. So with our project in aged care, it formed 2 projects. So we had a pilot project in 2012-13, where we worked with 10 older people in aged care to take photographs of their daily life and share it with us. And in that project, they just used a camera that the facility already owned, so it's heavily staff facilitated, and you can see us here holding the pictures. And what happened was they took the pictures, we printed them all off, and we put them on the walls of just in a seminar room. We gave everybody 10 sticky dots, and everyone voted for their favourites. Then we moved the favourites to a wall, and then we themed them collaboratively together. And we came up with a title, which was My Life, Frangipanis, Friendship and Football, that shared what they wanted to share, what they thought living in aged care was like for them in pictures. As you can see, Frangipanis, friendship and football. And football represents having activities and things to do. You can see some more of the photographs here. There wasn't a lot of photographs, and I guess what kind of was surprising to us, and might be surprising to you too, there's not very many negative images. And when we think about life in aged care and the end of life, a lot of people fear entering aged care, but you can see from these participants' photographs that they were enjoying life. But we didn't get any negative images, and part of that is because people have a reluctance to share negative aspects anyway. But we were also worried that because it was a central camera, one camera used by the facility, and people didn't have their own camera, they might have felt restricted and unable to really take a photograph of something more negative. So we did a second larger project. And I should say, this was exhibited on site and also at the Gallery of Modern Art. So the second project was the Australian Research Council project, which more broadly looked about what it was like to live in aged care and how can we improve it using an active ageing and happiness lens. I'm just going to talk about the method today. So in this, we gave another 10 residents the sole use of a camera for 2 weeks, asked them to take photos of highlights and lowlights, and we still didn't really get that much detail. So we asked them to do a day in the life task, to take a photograph every hour from waking until going to bed. And if you sort of think about what the photographs you might photograph doing that. And then we also arranged for a professional photographer, and Tricia King, who I think I saw on this, was doing a PhD, and she's a documentary photographer. We arranged for her to take photos everybody as a thank you. And many of these photographs that Tricia took ended up in the exhibition because the older people were like, I don't want to be the one taking the photos, I want to be in the photos. And we love the photos that Tricia took of us and of our rooms. Can we include them? And so we did. That's kind of unusual because in photo voice, creating sort of aesthetically pleasing and artful photographs is not really the point. It's about participants taking their own photos. But we purposely merged them in our project, partly because our older participants weren't very experienced in taking photographs, and so often the photographs weren't particularly, we take photographs all the time with our iPhones and stuff, not so much this cohort, and they really wanted the photographs that Tricia took as well. So we've got a mix of both. And a lot of them talked about having sort of stiff arthritic fingers, and so struggling to use the camera and wanting to be in the pictures. There's still an issue. You'll see that there's a tendency towards the positive, but this is how they wanted to share their lives. And it's concern about vulnerability and power. Often the photographs are not particularly critical, and sometimes we worry that, you know, is it there sort of a staff, a lot of these older people were extremely grateful for being cared for, and they're having good experiences, but they were not critical. So I'm going to share some of my favorite photographs. This is Patrick's photograph. It's his favorite day of the week, scrambled eggs Wednesday. You can see it's slightly blurry. And we've got a little quote here where he says, "I love food, I love a good meal. Breakfast for me is the best meal of the day. My picture, it's my favorite day, scrambled eggs Wednesday." I'm going to unfortunately say that every photograph is my favorite. I'm really sorry, but this is one of my favorites. This is June's mum's clock. It doesn't keep the chime very well at all. It just chimes randomly throughout the day to remind her that her mum's thinking of her, and she loves that. So quote, "Sometimes the clock, it chimes a little bit and I say, 'Is that you, mum? I love you. Thanks for visiting.' I seem to think that's mum saying, 'I'm here.'" I also love this one. This is Matilda's angel. So Matilda entered aged care like many people do, direct from hospital, and was never able to go home and pack things up. Her kids did it all, and they had a garage sale and they brought her there, and it was too hard. She felt she couldn't see it. Quite her whole life was wiped away from her. It was just so stressful. But the one thing that brought her peace was having her angel with her. And this angel, you can't see very well. It's about 1 meter high, and it's got a remote so that the wings flap and it lights up, and it did give her some peace. This is an example of Marie's bears, and the staff are dressing up at times just to play games. This photo, I think, really highlights the importance of narration. Okay, so it's a photograph of people knitting. This is a knitting circle that the staff set up, and they're knitting for charity. So they're knitting to create hats and blankets for sick children. But Elsie submitted this photograph, and as you'll see later, when she was living at home by herself in the community, Elsie thought about committing suicide. She was extremely lonely and isolated. But since she's come into aged care, she's been surrounded by people and she's had something to do. So she's like, "Oh, I've got crafts to do, and I've got into craft, and I'm part of a community." So for her, aged care has been the opposite of what we think. Sort of stereotypically, it's actually been a positive experience and it's enhanced her life. Love this too. My research fellow Geraldine Donahue took this photo. She was there one day and Monica said, "Can you just take a nice photo of me for my funeral, please?" And Geraldine did. And then in fact, this photo was used for Monica's funeral. And we know of at least 4 residents who used photographs from the project for their funerals. This is a photograph of bingo. Kind of stereotypically, we talk about bingo in aged care, and a lot of residents did hate bingo, but many did love it also. One of the things that we did was we did an arts day for Seniors Week. So this is a research initiated event, and it was a really wonderful time. We created this large artwork, and you can see in the bottom right, one of the residents who had dementia, at the exhibition, she just wouldn't leave that picture alone because it was of her friend who had passed away subsequently, and so she could remember the great day that we had. Although I do want to make the point that it's really important that you always do a risk assessment. So I luckily did a risk assessment for this activity, luckily because we're doing this with an art therapist, and we were throwing balloons full of paint onto the canvas, and I threw one and it broke and it sprayed into the eye. The paint went into an eye of a man with dementia, and it all turned out okay, but things happen. So it's really important to have both ethics and a risk assessment. Here's some photos from Trisha, and you can see how beautiful they are. This is Jeff. He used to be an aircraft engineer. He's got Parkinson's. He's struggled to adjust to life in aged care. He's been trying not to shut down in one room. This is Carol. She loves football. She loved football. Her hair is dyed the Brisbane Broncos maroon colour. It's her with a friend. And when Carol died, staff, staff get close relationships with certain residents, and Carol, she had an intellectual disability. She couldn't communicate very well, so her speech was really challenging to understand, but staff had a really close relationship with her, and they knew she loved Brisbane Broncos, so they went and they released some balloons in her memory, and they released the colours of the balloons. These are the colours of the Brisbane Bronco, maroon and gold. But for one final tease, they also released a blue balloon in the colour of the rivals, Sydney Blues. And I really like this because it shows how much residents mean to staff members, and that they mourn when they die as well. And they've come up sometimes with creative ways to remember and value the individual resident. So our facility each year had a memorial for older people that died in aged care, and staff members or family could carry the stone down the aisle and then just share a memory of them, and then the stone became part of a water feature on the facility. So when you do something like this, it's really important that you engage in a participatory and respectful manner, of course, which we all know, but the exhibition does involve a lot of planning, it's a lot of processing. So what we do is get people to take their photographs, then we print them all off, hang them on the walls, and then we do a selection process. So I've got some photographs of that. It's very collaborative, involves like multiple meetings. We figure out how to caption them, figure out which photographs should go in the exhibition and how we might theme them. And we did that in conjunction with residents. We also followed a really layered and repeated process of ethics. Here you can see we asked people, what did they want included? Did they want their name? Did they want their own pseudonym? Did they want their poem included? Did they want their pictographs? The whole thing. But quality exhibitions take time, organisation and energy. You can just do, and photo voices is often common, you can just print them off on a printer and hang them on a peg and a piece of string. We had a large budget with this project, and so we got them professionally graphically designed and quite large. We had this at the State Library of Queensland, which I think added to the impact, and is well worth doing if you had that budget. And we went to, this is us planning the event and using our paper black and white printouts to figure out what size we might make the images. Here we are. It's hard to believe this is like 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago. It feels like just the other day. We had a wonderful opening, opened by a state minister, over 100 people for the opening, and we had a lot of radio and TV interviews, including with residents and poetry readings, and it was really impactful. We had 2 private viewings for frailer residents. So when the State Library of Queensland was closed, they came with staff and got to enjoy it themselves. So that's one of the residents with dementia with her daughter with a photograph that she loved, Remembering Arts Day. And overall, residents, their families and staff were extremely delighted just to see their lives and their stories so publicly shared, I guess. There was some challenges though. So there's a bit of debate about whose photographs should be exhibited, and making sure that everybody, that not one person didn't have more photographs exhibited than somebody else. And then also once there, we did choose to show more, make some photographs bigger than others. So there was a little bit of jealousy there. And then actually on the day of the opening, one of the residents asked for us to remove one of her poems because she felt that even though we'd gone through the whole consent process, she felt that it would be too identifiable and that fellow residents and staff would know it was from her because it was a negative, she was quite negative about something. It was my favourite poem actually, and I'm still, disappointed that we couldn't exhibit it. But of course, you've got to respect your participants' views. We always evaluate them. So we evaluate the exhibition in a variety of different ways. We had a guest book, we had a written survey, and we had a cardboard tree, which I'll show in a second. My uni's been using this thing called the Net Promoter Score, which is, would you recommend this event to somebody else? And if you get a 10, that's like the best, and we got a 10. And people praise it as respectful and moving, revealing, shining an important light on an often forgotten population, showing what they wanted to work towards having in their organisation and reminding them that residents aren't just charts and vital signs, they're people with feelings, which I think is important. This is the feedback tree. It's a cardboard tree. You can assemble it. It's taller than me. It's about 2 meters high. And we ask people to write on their reactions to the exhibition and what they thought about their own future of aging. And that was quite an innovative way, I think, to capture data. So we learned a lot of lessons from this. It is a time-consuming process. Ethics can be quite time-consuming, and we did sort of instruct people either to get consent if they had photographs with people in them, or to try not to make the photograph of people identifying. There's lots of competing interests at play too. What the residents want, what we want as research, what the media wants, what our industry partner wants. And there's kind of expectations too. So this is a really powerful method, I think, but not everybody is naturally a good photographer. So the narrative remains key to me as well. So some photo voice exhibitions will just have the photographs, but I like the combination. And if at all possible, you really need a budget for graphic design and the installation of the exhibition, like just getting them straight. Like I'm atrocious at that kind of, the kind of installation. You need somebody who's a professional to help you with that and be organised. Now I want to end the section on photo voice with the power of a photograph. So this is Pearl's room. So Pearl was the star of our aged care exhibition. She featured on our advertising. You can see her in her room. I love Pearl. She was the first person I interviewed in this project, and we bonded over a shared love of The Bold and the Beautiful and Ridge and Stephanie. But what's great about Pearl, she loved writing and dreaming, and she spent a lot of time just dreaming, writing poems and stories at her writing desk. And she's 92 at the time of this photo. But then Pearl had a fall in her room and ended up in hospital. And so her family requested that all the clutter from her room be removed. And I think the photograph and the comparison shows the difference. And I don't want to blame anybody. This is about, I try to keep somebody safe, but it is an acknowledgement of, I guess, risk and value and identity and what's important as we grow older in care and aged care contexts. So, Christine, I was going to take a moment to breathe here because I know I'm
of course.
But if anyone's got any questions about photo voice, I can answer them now, or we can hold them over to the end.
You can unmute your mic if you have any questions. None are coming through.
That's all right. I can keep going, and then we can do it all at the end. Yeah,
absolutely fine.
Okay.
If you need a drink or anything,
No, no, it's all right. Like I'm conscious. I've got lots to go through. So,
a very lovely, positive comment. Beautiful project.
Oh, good. Thank you. Someone said my name. Who was that?
Me. It's Meredith. Yvonne, how are you?
Good. I can't see you, Meredith, but I can hear you.
Oh, okay. A very quick question.
Yep.
Is there any way to go back and know how Pearl is?
Yeah, she unfortunately has died. I know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Yvonne.
Yeah, I know. But
sorry.
I know. It's sad, right? I don't know where this is recorded, but I did and ah about sharing that photograph because, like, to me, that's just really telling and really sad. Because she's a beautiful person. Do you know what I mean? And everyone wants to do their best for her. But yeah.
Oh, it just spoke volumes. Thanks.
Right? Yeah, I know. And that's the power of a good photograph, right? Anyway. Now, don't make me cry, Meredith. You make me all sad. Hate you. Okay. Oh, okay. Everyone hopefully will do some crying now because this is my favorite methodology, which I just kind of stumbled on, actually. So I'm going to talk about what I call research poetry. It's a form of found poetry. It goes by a trillion different names. Poetic transcription, transcript poems, poetic inquiry, interview poems. It really is just, it's a form of found poetry. So found poetry is when poetry is created out of text that already exists in the world. So it could be anything. It could be a TV show, a page from a novel, another poem, a conversation you hear, or an interview transcript. And there's a lot of books that tell you how to do this. So if you are interested, there's lots of places to start. But research poetry is just creating poems or poem-like prose from research data. And the good thing about it is that it's not as scary, I think, as a blank page. All you've got to do is find some good language and improve it. So you just got to keep your ears and your eyes open for some good language and how you might create a poem from that. It's a non-linear approach. You just literally print off your transcripts and dive into them and then rearrange the words to craft a poem. And there is like different standards for research poems in terms of a research poem. It's kind of got a lower standard than an artistic poem because you've got to work with the data you have. Last year, I wrote a process about how to do that, and I called it icy because it is kind of like an icy journey. It first seems kind of challenging, full of slips, but with a bit of time and a guide, you can figure out how to do it. And so I outlined 5 steps. Step 1 is immersion, so immerse yourself with your data. Step 2 is create the poem, or you first go of a poem. Step 3 is critical reflection. So like critically reflect on, is it a good poem? What can I cut to make it better? Step 4 is think about the ethics. You've always got to think about the ethics. Like in this situation, we crafted some poems and then we took them back to our aged care residents. And one of the wives of she didn't like her husband's poem because she felt it was too negative, even though it was accurate representation of what he said. So we wrote another one. And then engagement. And by engagement, I mean reaching out to the public, but also engaging with the world of poetry. And I've been fortunate to work with a poet, Sarah Hombat, who's a brilliant person, a brilliant poet, and I've learned a lot collaborating with her. So let me read a poem, keeping in mind that this is created exactly from an interview transcript, and I'll show you the transcript in a second. You're taken care of. I'm very satisfied with my room. I've got my own furniture, so why wouldn't I be? It's just like my own home, only I don't do no work. I've got my friends here. I go to bingo. I join in exercises. I go for any walks. I have a good family. They take me places, though I haven't been able to find a nice man yet. Nice, right? And there's a few things that work in that poem. You can sort of feel Ethel's personality there, so that, you know, the phrases, and you're kind of sort of surprised at the end because it's kind of that notion of her still seeking love. It kind of pushes against their stereotypical views about things. And so creating that is just going through an interview transcript and just grabbing any phrases that speak to you. So you can see here on the right-hand side is the actual interview, and then I've just taken those words and rearranged it into sort of a poetic form. Okay, I'll pause so you can just sort of read that. And you just sort of play with it. It's really fun. If you've got like a slight creative bend to you, you'll really love doing this. There's a few things that, you know, so what makes it work, I guess, is the speaker's unique voice. So she's got her sort of unique colloquialisms. I've got my own furniture. You get this feeling of a memorable sense of personality and a sense of humour. And if you get into doing sort of research poetry, there are some criteria against which you can assess the quality of your poem. I don't have time to go in that today, but I'm happy to send some references around about that. And when you're reading your transcripts, often a memorable description might jump out, or when you're doing the interview. So I did this interview, and I remember when she said these things, I just thought, oh my God. So she talks about how she hates being here, you lose everything, you've got the barest minimum, and she could scream the place down. And that became a poem. My family said I was too old to be on my own, that I needed organising. But you lose everything. You lose everything to come in here. As you can see, you only have the barest minimum. There's not much here. It's not nice at all. It's not good for me. I can't get out. That's what you lose when you come in. All your independence is taken away from you. I'm not able to do it myself. That's very hard to take. You get so frustrated at times, you could scream the place down. And this poem became the title of a journal article you see there. So good research poetry should shock us into feeling, into thinking differently. It should kind of be like, oh, shoot, you know, it should change you. So this is, I alluded before to Elsie talking about feeling like suicide when she lived at home. And so here's her poem about that. Home. At home I was left on my own all day alone. Thought I'm still here, another day alone. Thought take your pills, Elizabeth, and you'll be out from stress, from worry. But since I've been here, I've reason to get up, get dressed every morning. I've got, you know, company, which I never had at home. So I should make a note about the pseudonyms I've used in here. Some are chosen by participants themselves, some I've changed to protect their identity in terms of uniquely, you know, that whole process of deductive identification. You might be able to piece together some details of a person's life, so we have changed pseudonyms so you can't do that. Oh, and I love this. So this is from Marcy Myers in America. So this is like concrete poetry. It's where you use a visual shape and you trick yourself into thinking about it. So this is the shape of a casserole. She created it after listening to a 60 Minutes episode about mental illness, and I'll read it. Do you know the difference between being a mother of a child with mental illness and the mother of a child with a broken leg? I know it sounds like a joke, but it's not. Please don't laugh when I say casserole because it's not funny. When your child breaks a leg, the church organises a brigade of casserole makers, family, friends, neighbours, co-workers bring food. But when your child is in the psych ward, there are no casseroles. Alone, you sit in an empty place with stigma at the table. Do not blame the church, neighbour association or social committee at work. It's not their fault. You didn't tell them. Don't blame yourself either. Blame it on stigma. Invite them over for a stigma casserole. So you can see, I hope you can see that's in the shape of a casserole. So I saw Marcy's work and I was like, oh, that's cool. So I had a go and I created like an hourglass. When your time is up, everyone comes and goes so quickly. Since I've been here, so many people have passed away. They've gone their way now. It makes you wonder how much longer you've got. It's a daily thought. You don't know when your time is up. So I really love that, and I haven't done this yet. This is from Scottish poet Robert Montgomery, who goes around and does poetry installations in public spaces, on walls, on the side of just everywhere. And this is something I would like to do in the future as well, just really to try and engage people. So that's a future plan. Oh, good. I'm doing really well with time, so I do want to have a conversation. So this last bit should just take 10 or 15 minutes, not even. So the last thing I've done, only a little bit really, is with drawing and cartoons. I've really just only started doing this the last wee bit, and mostly in the ag care journey space. The project we co-designed an app with older caregivers. So this, we used a couple of different arts-based approach. So this drawing, we had an artist on the research team draw in response to interview transcripts. So here Stephanie Bonson drew, when someone, a loved one passes away, sometimes they've got a piece of furniture they would always sit in. And so this is the memory of a loved one in their favourite chair. They're no longer there, but you can sense that they're like a ghostly memory in their chair. And I also asked, in the Inside Aged Care project, retirement village residents to draw and sketch 3 things. 1, their experience of ageing. 2, their expectations of aged care. And 3, their experience. And we tried to say, look, there's no right or wrong way to do it, just give it a go. And they're really good. So here you can see their experience of ageing, and this person's saying it's about watching generations ahead. And the experience of ageing was very much about having time to do things, and also a narrative of decline. Here, this person talks about enjoying recreation and sport and family. Another one talks about how they're slowing down into tiredness. It's got the arrow going down, wondering where their energy has gone. And this other woman talks about how she has to get dressed with her husband's help every day. The expectations of retirement living, so these retirement village residents, but living it up, enjoying walks together, even with your walkers, enjoying the sunset. And then the experiences are about always having someone to do things with and just having a lot of fun. This is great, I think. It sort of shows, so on the left-hand side, it's about what life was like before. They were at home. Life was just hard. There was a house to clean and stairs to climb and lawns to mow and the pool to clean and hedges to cut. But now they're in the retirement village and it's just a lot easier and simpler life, so before and after. So with the Our Care Journey project, I try to give instructions for them to be like super creative and to zoom in on details and to photograph metaphors and signs and concepts. They didn't really do that, but I did try to push this a bit more. And I should say that we also gave all our participants photography training too. Not massive photography training, but Tricia ran a session for in one project. And so we've tried to upskill them, but yeah, we can talk about that actually later. I'm going to, because I'm doing so well with time, I'm going to try and, oh my God, I'm so useless. Hang on. I'm going to try and play this video because it's super great. So this is Our Care Journey. It was in QT's The Cube. Sorry. Why is it? Oh, phew. Okay, I'm going to press play. So you get a sense of, I hope, the size. So we're at QT's The Cube, and behind me you can see the Co-Designing Care exhibition. So this showcases the outcomes of the project and the process of developing the app Our Care Journey. So this is an app that that's been designed with and for caregivers. That's people providing informal care to a loved one.
And that's the reason we're here today is because on Monday we launched our care journal, which was an app funded by the Queensland Government. So we worked with about 20 carers and QUT Design Lab to see what their care journey is, the highs, the lows, significant moments, and how technology might be used to help that.
So this exhibition really uses arts-based research methodology. So we've used cartoons, sketches, photographs.
So I'm very much, as a designer, driven by the philosophy that people who are affected by design decisions need to take part in the making of those decisions. So it was only common sense to make sure that people who are going to be using the technology collaborate with us as co-designers on shaping that technology.
And we put cameras in the hands of informal caregivers and ask them to take photographs of the highlights and the lowlights of their lives and every moment in between.
I think it's just impact. When people walk in here, so we had the launch, when people walked in, they were like, wow. And it's fun. It's better than someone going through a PowerPoint presentation talking about it. They can actually take themselves on their own little journey and be interactive, use their hands, look up in awe at the size and colour of it. And it really helps to tell the story of what we've done to design this app.
1 in 10 of us in Australia are caregivers. That's nearly 3 million people. And informal caregivers save the economy $60 billion.
I think one of the things that I'm really proud about this is that people can share the stories of who the person.
Okay, I'm going to come back to, I'll answer some of those questions too, actually, about the poems. Yeah, we did share them. We did a big checking process, and we took them back to the participants. We got ethics for it. We went back and revised the ethics. Actually, I might have a conversation about those questions afterwards, but we did all those things. So this is a great project, the Our Care Journey project. And that I'd never done a digital exhibition before, and it was really impactful, and I hope you can see hope you get a sense of how impactful it was. It's just ginormous, and then each of those colours is a different theme. So red is hospital care, the pink of course is about love, and you could flip through it and interact with it, and it was really awesome. Oh my god, oh, there we are. So this is us with some of the participants on opening night. So it was carers, mostly informal carers, so parents and spouses and grandchildren, mostly of older people, but also of children with disabilities. Again, we did the survey and everyone was pretty positive, and they felt that it was a really mind-blowing and inspirational event. This is from Andrea, who cares for her I've got to move this stuff so I can see everything. Yeah, it was a 92-year-old grandmother. So the highlight is the Scrabble and memories. The low light is the physical environment with steps where they can't easily access things. You can see the love and the caregiver's actions. So this is Libby, her 82-year-old mother-in-law lives with them, and she prepares her meals all the time, but in these specially labelled containers. And I love this. So the Aging Revolution, who we collaborate with, who are a wonderful team, they paid for a cartoonist, Simon Neilburn, to sit in on the workshops. And so he sketched, while participants were talking, he sketched in black and white all their kind of narratives, and then showed them to them, and then went away and coloured them in, and then we put them in the exhibition. And this is one of my favourite. It talks about how when you become a carer, all you have in your toolkit is love. You've got nothing else. You don't have any medical knowledge or anything like that. You've just got love to offer. Oh, and okay, I pretty much love all of this. Sorry. So this is the caregiving mask. And I'll read the bottom part where the carer talks about she always has to have her brave face on when she really wants to cry or scream. So she's got two faces. And so researcher Stephanie drew an image of that, her response to that. And this, Neil was a carer for her mother with severe dementia, and she talked about how she just sometimes wanted to knock her mum out with her hammer, but her best friend is Andre Rieu, because she could play his DVDs and her mum would be happy. So Andre Rieu became the carer's friend. And caregivers, like we know this, they have to manage their own grief and their own anger. So we made a little poem about this, about Ellie. Frustration. I get frustrated. We'd planned to do a lot we can't do. So I kicked things. I went out. I punched the palings out of the fence. I busted sclerosis. So I broke all my knuckles. And I love this too. I think we know anyone who's cared for anybody at the end of life. but bed at home does become a little bit of a hospital. It's no longer a place of rest or refuge, but a site of medical intervention. And so Stephanie sketched that here. So that was it's like a zoom through 3 great methods. I've had a lot of fun doing photo voice, research poetry, and art. I have run in the past face-to-face workshops on both photo voice and research poetry. We're super happy to run one of those online if there's interest, so we can talk about that. Oh, and other exciting news is I'm writing a book. I'm like 75% of the way through it about these kind of things. It should come out hopefully, if I can speed up and do this quicker, December 2020, but more likely January 2021. And it's entitled Creative Arts-Based Research in Aged Care. If I stop sharing. Yeah, here we are. I'm back now. I'm done.
Thank you so much. So I will just do a quick little summary because I know I've attended a few of your workshops before, Yvonne, and one of the things you do say is that you hope the audience will have a physical or emotional reaction to your presentation or to the images or to the poetry. And we have had a few beautiful reactions in the comments.
Oh, good.
About needing tissues. I think you said to me, your measure of success is if a participant
someone cries.
With tissues, you've done your job. You've had an impact with your research in that capacity. So we've had fantastic responses like that.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to try and answer some of these. So my own background, Suzanne, I wish I had a background as an artist. I freaking do not. I've got no professional training in art therapy or art or anything like that. So actually, I've got a bizarre background. My PhD's in psychology, but I'm not a clinical psychologist, sort of social experimental psychology. It was on body image in the media. So I have always had an interest in the visual. But then I ended up in the School of Design. And I've been in school design. I've been here in sort of design school for the last decade, thinking about how people interact with places and things. So just kind of, okay. I'm just going to stop talking. People just verbally share their questions too. The creations of the poems, yes. So we did them in different ways. Traditionally, yes, the researcher does create them from the transcripts. We did try to engage with our aged care residents and get them. We ran a on-site poetry writing workshop with them, but no one really, they had fun doing that, but no one really wanted to create anything from their own. They just didn't want to do it. And as part of that project, halfway through the project, we gave them a life summary, which included their poems, and they could change them. And that's where they came back to us. And as I alluded, one of the wives wanted her husband poem, another poem written because she felt it was too negative about his life. And they all got to approve them. And when I sort of discovered research poetry as a method, we went back to our ethics committee and amended it as a approach. And I now just build it in along with photo voice. I build it in. It's what we're going to do. But it's highly what involvement. So they all reviewed them. They could have edited them, but no one chose to. They did ask for one to be rewritten and one asked for one to be withdrawn. Yeah.
There's a good question around, do you have a theoretical framework that you use to maybe do some of your analysis or to underpin some of your research on?
No, not really. Just sort of generic. I mean, it kind of varies depending on what question I'm asking or looking at. So often if I'm doing a design approach, I might be looking at sort of biophilia, which is nature and space and how that impacts people. But I'm kind of, at the moment, just kind of open. Arts-based research is just very, I guess, bottom up. We did use in the aged care project that was kind of, we're sort of trying to figure out how they could actively age, how they could age well. So that was the framing. And our facility had a interesting approach, a good one about organizational culture, where they put residents' happiness to the beginning. So we had an organizational culture framework as well, but nothing, not good enough. Yeah, not enough.
A few really interesting observations from our participants have been around, they found the poetry to bring in maybe a bit more of the negative aspect versus the photos being quite positive and uplifting, and then also maybe versus some of the cartoons. They sort of asked, can you speak to that at all, that process?
Okay, it's funny because I thought that the photographs would be more negative, do you know what I mean? And we did try to push them to be more realistic about life and aged care and to share, and they're always kind of just quite positive. And I don't know if it's a bias we have in the visual, like if we were to take photographs, would we be more, and there is a little bit in the literature that does suggest that we've got a bias towards just, recording and remembering and sharing the more positive, and then sometimes our narratives are more negative. I don't have a very good answer there. Yeah, sorry. someone else pipe in, have a conversation.
Diana, did you want to ask your question? If you're connected, you can unmute your mics.
And hang on, I'm just putting the Facebook video for the
there, thank you so much. Yeah,
no worries.
Diana or Geraldine, I know you have a question about camera and voice to camera.
Oh yeah, hi, fantastic work, Yvonne. I just love it.
Oh, good, thanks.
And I'm with you with Andre Rio, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Played at every senior citizens home I've ever been to, and it drives me crazy.
So he is the carer's friend.
I'm just wondering about the use of the camera and the voice of the camera itself. And I'm wondering if you're ever experimenting with leaving the camera or the video rolling by itself.
I haven't done that.
Or sort of even the difference of using different types of cameras, different, you know, even if they're taped on to someone's body and things like that.
That would be super cool. That's a really great idea for a project. We haven't done that at all. We purposely got a user-friendly, really simple, big button kind of camera. But our older participants in aged care, most of them weren't comfortable with using it. I mean, it sounds like a generalisation, but it is the truth. Although there's one resident who still has it now, and the project ended 3 years ago. She wouldn't give it back. We just let her keep it. But that's a really good idea.
Yeah, because it's really quite a different perspective from that angle. And I think it adds another critical
lens. I mean, even if you set it up so it went, actually, that'd be a really good idea if it went off like every 30 seconds or something. Yeah, and particularly where we've got these allegations of abuse and neglect, and actually Tim Henwood from the University of Queensland and his colleagues did a project where they put an activity monitor on older people in aged care. I'm going to get the stat wrong, but they only spent, I think, maybe an hour of the day or less, 60 minutes, like moving, doing it or standing. Like most of the day spent just, it's even less than that, I forget. So you could, that'd be, I want to do that now. Have a camera that records what happens. Yeah.
Could I say something? I think I love what you're doing. It's amazing. But I also had a similar experience around a professional photographer coming into residential aged care. And I expected, he was filming some other arts-based stuff that I'd done. And I expected the residents and participants in the study to really resist having their photos taken. And they loved it. Every single resident wanted to engage with him and to have their photos taken, even those who had been really resistant of the whole research, you know, any of the other bits of the research process. And I found that really interesting around that idea of needing to be visible and also wanting to have your identity clearly marked in this space. And I don't think people get the opportunity to do that. I mean, in my experience, hardly anyone has visitors. The people I'm working with have moderate to late stage dementia. Literally no one can get in, and they definitely can't get out. They're locked in. So that idea of visibility was just so powerful for them.
And having their photo taken, like we just sort of, sometimes particularly older people don't get their photo taken very often. Do you know, it was just, surprising.
Yeah.
And they really valued that.
Yeah. And they love the photos.
They were beautiful, because I think Trisha, I don't know if she's still here, but Trisha took the photographs and she's a wonderful photographer. They're beautifully composed, and although there's a great project out in New Zealand, it's never got much awareness. In 1996, a professional documentary photographer went and took photos in an aged care home, but included photographs of people showering and sort of vulnerable things, and it caused quite an uproar in the photographs because they were like vulnerability and all those ethics and all that, and so that actually ended up getting withdrawn. So there's a whole range about what's acceptable for us to see and not see.
Yeah.
Diana, I think you're here. You've asked your question twice. You might really want it answered. I see you put your video on, so go ahead. Shoot, ask your question.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
I'm very curious about. So my question goes between what's for you the difference between art-based research and design-based research, and now that we're talking about like also arts-based research or art therapy and craft therapy.
Yep. All the hard questions. So art is, I think, sort of the visual arts, poetry, photography, all the kind of creative arts, that's art. Design is a way of doing with a spatial language and maybe a process of creativity. So for me, to design is design thinking. We're probably all aware of that, away, you know, and spatial awareness. Although that's in general. You mentioned craft. One of my PhD students is a tapestry weaver, and she placed her loom in an aged care facility for 6 months and co-weaved a tapestry with the aged care residents. So that's craft, I think. Yeah, so design, I guess, is, yeah, that more, for me anyway, more spatial, and design of the building and the environment and things like that. Was art to me is more expressive. I hope that gives some answer. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right. I'm just trying to see if there's any questions we haven't answered.
We have a couple. Narissa, I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly, but would you like to jump in and ask your question?
My question was just about, I guess, you know, thinking about photo voice as being a very particular type of a method. I've wondered whether if participants wanted to alter their image, because they might take an image and, you know, living in this day and age now that everything's on their phone, there's filters, there's all these lovely sort of things that they can do, whether that, you know, if they do alter, is that now not photo voice but something different, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would still call that photo voice. So photo voice is literally joining a photographer's voice, and if they've altered the photo, that's their voice has altered it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I would think, but you just have to make the argument. Like, they can choose to present whatever they like, you know, and it would be really cool if they could merge. And I've always wanted people to be more, I guess, boundary pushing in their photographs. So there's some great projects out there in Canada, people with HIV taking photographs of their pill bottles and things like that, and about their loss of dreams and hopes. And I've never got any data like that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
So we've got a couple of minutes left. If anyone has a desperate question they'd like to ask that maybe Yvonne and I have missed at all. But I feel like we've just sort of opened up a conversation together and kind of got like-minded scholars together who are interested in the space. So it would be fantastic to create some kind of network, Yvonne,
I think
around the world, you know,
yeah,
where we can share information and share knowledge. I know you're incredibly generous. You're very open access with all of your information. It's something that, you know, I absolutely love about your collaborations, that you're so, you know, sharing about your knowledge. So thank you so much for that today.
No worries. I mean, I'd be really happy if someone else, if just a few of you have a go doing this yourselves. Do you know what I mean? Because I think these are really emotive and really powerful methodologies, and that all of us are working sometimes with vulnerable populations that perhaps we just need to, I don't know, you know, push others to think differently about things.
Absolutely. And we've got some pushing maybe for a session about ethics, potentially for another session about poetry. And I fully agree with you. The space needs more people sharing what we're doing and how we're doing it. And because I use this methodology with young people, so different population, and I have very different findings. And I'm sure there are many in our group who are here today who use these methods and have also very different findings. So thank you so much for your amazing work has come in. Thank you so much. And I think we can wrap up our session today. I appreciate you all attending, and thank you to Yvonne for your valuable time, and also to the Faculty Research Office for hosting us as well. Thanks you,
everybody. Thanks for participating. The links to the PowerPoint's there, and I'm on Twitter, so just, reach out.
Yeah, Twitter as well.
Yeah, thanks, Christine.
Thank you. I'll save the chat as well so I can send it through to you.
That'd be great. And a few people asked for the recording. If you can send that to me when you're done as well, it'd be great.
Yes, I will do that.
Cool.
I'll do both.
Thanks, people I know.
Yeah, thanks, people you know, for coming.
Hey, Sandra, and Meredith, and Trisha, and Miriam. That's about it. That's all my friends. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.